They're in the streets. They're knocking on doors. They're making calls. Mamdani, AOC, and Bernie, they're going to turn on so much pressure on Schumer and Hakeem until it's open warfare or someone surrenders. Until then, the communists are just going to infiltrate the party like a parasite inside a host's body. But it's Chuck who's really feeling the heat. One of Mamdani's little leprechauns who won in New York. Turns out she was arrested outside of Chuck's office just last year. Then she said, quote, any politician who's not doing something about Palestine is failing New Yorkers. The communists are harshly critical of Israel. Democrats win 2/3 of the Jewish vote. So this is going to be a big problem. Wait until the communists go on CNN or CBS and start trashing Israel. This is going to get wild. These people are like Antifa in a pantsuit. The Democrats didn't call out Antifa. They didn't really have to because they didn't take their seats. But now that power's on the line, real money, real influence, the Democrats are going to have to fight back. They have to. The communists are more of a threat to the Democratic Party than Donald Trump ever was. Because Donald Trump, he's not messing with your primaries. Communists are in the streets. They're knocking on doors. They're making calls. It's a movement and a machine. The Obama boys, they know a little thing or two about community organizing.
It is very clear that the groups on the left, Justice Democrats, Democratic Socialists of America, Our Revolution, are out organizing, out fundraising, out working, out maneuvering the traditional party institutions. They have captured the energy. They are being more creative. They're being more strategic. They're being more aggressive. And if you are someone in the Democratic establishment, you should be deeply concerned about what this says.
The Democratic Party has a two-front war in its hands. They have to beat MAGA in the midterms and take the White House in 28. And they have to fight off a guerrilla army on their far left. We're about to see what the Democratic Party's made of and whether it can even survive.
If they fought them the way they fight Republicans or the way they fight me, they'd be victorious. They didn't beat us, but they'd be victorious against the communists. But they don't have the courage to do so. So they're turning communists themselves, becoming a communist party. These are not social Democrats. These are hardcore, godless communists. They're godless communists. All communists are godless. They don't believe in God. This is the most serious threat to our country since its existence.
Trump just put it down. This is the most serious threat in 250 years. I thought we beat communism. We won the Cold War. Now we have to win it again in the Bronx? This is round two. Communism never dies because college professors keep it alive. Some Democrats think they can co-opt the communists and take on Trump with bigger energy.
I mean, look, we've got to have a Big Ten if we want a majority. And the reality is that while the media and a lot of talking heads like to try to point out all the differences here, there are a lot of things that we're united on. You know, like, let's make sure that we stop ICE from terrorizing our cities. I've said ICE not only needs to be abolished, they need to be prosecuted. I think there's a lot of Democrats who would agree on that.
There's a lot Democrats and communists agree on? Like what? This woman, Chevalier, says she wants to seize the means of production. That's illegal. That's not America. She says she wants to nationalize pharmaceutical companies and abolish police. Is that something they have in common? Or how about this? Chevalier wants to seize all properties from landlords. The funny thing is, Chevalier's father's a landlord. So she has daddy issues. And how's she going to even do that? Are a bunch of thugs in Manhattan going to torture the landlords until they sign over the deeds? Government seizing private property is going to lead to blood in the streets. Always has. We fought a revolution against a tyrannical government. Do communists even celebrate July 4th? Someone should ask them that question. Mamdani, he's already got cracking. He's freezing rents.
New York, the Independent Rent Guidelines Board just froze the rent. That means if you're one of the more than 2 million New Yorkers who lives in a rent-stabilized apartment, your rent's going to be frozen next year.
New York City apartments are going to start falling apart because landlords won't be able to afford maintenance if they can't raise rent. One of the reasons rent's out of control here is because Biden poured 3 million illegals into the city and Democrats didn't build any more apartments. Supply and demand. The Supreme Court just gave Trump full powers, though, to deport hundreds of thousands of Haitians and Syrians. But Mondani says, over my dead body.
To have people who frankly taught the world about freedom have their own freedom be put in jeopardy by the actions of a Supreme Court and a federal administration, it is not only cruel, it's something that we will not ever accept.
So who put Mondani and these commies in power? 40% of the city is foreign-born, 70% non-white. A majority of the city is on some sort of government welfare, but young college-educated white women are a big part of the base. They can't get jobs with their useless degrees, so they can't afford rent. And they're not getting married, so they're kind of stuck. And they're angry at America, at capitalism, and at their party. The Democratic Party kind of screwed them, pressured them to take out six-figure loans to get dumb degrees, raised the cost of living here with reckless spending and open borders, and then the media told them to act like men. Men don't like that. Take it from me. So they're single, alone, and they're definitely not voting Republican, so they're voting commie. They want to blow up the system.
I know people like this is just New York. It's just this very blue state with all these, and you know who voted them? Like these white, liberal, purple-haired, educated brats. That's who voted, who want to, I guess, overthrow the government of the United States, whether peacefully or what, and install communism and socialism.
The purple hairs got indoctrinated in college, and they want to take down the man. They're unhappy, and they want to make sure everybody else is just as unhappy as they are. Gavin Newsom's watching this from out west, and he's thinking, if you can't beat him, join him.
It's time for a national billionaires tax and a new social contract. Think about this, just 10% of people, 10% of people in this country own 2/3 of the wealth. A 30-year-old, for the first time in American history, is not doing better than his or her parents. That's a 5-alarm fire. It's time for an economic reset.
Newsom wants to slap California billionaires with a 5% wealth tax. Number one, that's illegal. Can't tax wealth. Number two, you hear that sound? That's the sound of every billionaire leaving California. The donors are panicking because soon they'll be standing in front of a firing squad that they paid for. Donors are already broke after Kamala blew $2.5 billion. And now they're going to have to spend to fend off primary challenges by commies and spend to take back Congress and the White House from Republicans. They don't have that kind of money because communists and Democrats are threatening to seize their money. So where's Obama? Barry's going to have to referee this. He's kind of the leader of the party. Is he going to take a stand? Pelosi's retiring. Biden has cancer. Bubba's up with the Energizer Bunny in Chappaqua. After Trump won re-election, what do we hear? That the Democrats would have to define what they stand for. Not just being anti-Trump, but what does it mean to be a Democrat? Well, here's their opportunity. All it takes is some common sense.
I think I'd be the greatest communist in history. I'd give free rent. Ladies and gentlemen, from now on, you don't have to pay any rent. From now on, anybody wants a house, don't worry about it. Just pick the house you want. Everybody gets free food. Everything is free from this point forward. Everyone's going to vote for me. The problem is, after 2 or 3 years, the country is a disaster area. That first year, boy, you're the most popular. It's happening right now in New York and California. But you'll start living in squalor.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest.
I'm Blair Mill.
And I'm Tracy Hutchins. The state is charging a man with possession of child pornography, but the FBI says more charges are on the way. They believe the suspect recorded boys in restrooms in at least 3 counties. You see many of those locations on the map.
Atlanta News First reporter Justin Berger is live from the FBI's Atlanta office tonight. Justin, the special agent in charge is calling this an egregious case.
Yeah, Blair, that's right. Because of where she says the suspect allegedly targeted his victims at public parks and schools. In all, recordings from potentially 40 different days spanning 2 years with many victims.
Fathers and sons practicing on the baseball diamond Friday afternoon at Rabbit Hill Park. One of the locations the FBI believes a man recorded a series of videos from inside a restroom.
We've been to this park for a long time now and just never even imagined something like that's going on.
The FBI identifying 5 locations across Gwinnett, Jackson, and Oconee counties where they say a freelance photographer targeted boys in public restrooms and high school athletic events.
What he did was leverage his position as a photographer to gain access to several local areas to take images of individuals without their knowledge.
The FBI not releasing the suspect's name, photo, or description, but tells me he is in custody in North Georgia, charged by the state with possession of child pornography. The suspect was the subject of a separate federal investigation, at which point the videos were discovered by an agent. The federal agency says superseding charges are forthcoming, but not ready yet.
I'm really appalled, and I think the public, there will be outcry for this.
Rents, look at this.
New York, the Independent Rent Guidelines Board just froze the rent. That means if you're one of the more than 2 million New Yorkers who lives in a rent-stabilized apartment, your rent's going to be frozen next year.
From the top of a balcony to down by the stage, rent-stabilized New Yorkers erupted in celebration. For the first time ever, the Rent Guidelines Board voted to freeze rents on both 1- and 2-year leases. A historic decision that means more than 1 million New Yorkers living in rent-stabilized apartments won't pay $1 more in rent for the next 2 years. All but one board member voted in favor of the measure, with Mayor Zohran Mamdani calling it a historic victory for New Yorkers.
It means everything. It means that our voices were heard, finally.
Bronx tenant Ann Maiden says she can finally breathe again.
But landlords called the whole process a sham. Just hours before the vote, Christina Smith, a member of the board who represented landlords, resigned from her post, accusing the panel of ignoring data because it was required to deliver a freeze. Building owners say the decision means there will be less investment in maintenance and repairs, ultimately hurting renters.
So the renters
lose. Have to lay off some of the supers. Only choice. It's a business. People don't get it.
I'm so proud of people my age and young people getting together and forming coalitions.
But they don't understand. This just doomed New York City's supply of apartments. There will now be less apartments for multiple reasons. And here's the biggest one.
I feel like I'm standing in a time capsule from the 70s. This is a 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx that rents for $811 a month.
Okay.
That's if the landlord were to actually put it up for rent. This is a rent-stabilized apartment, but look around. The landlord says there is so much work that has to be done here to bring it up to code that it doesn't make financial sense to rent it out.
The owner is deciding to lose less money by just keeping it vacant.
Chipped and peeling lead paint, an outdated bathroom, and that red carpet, far from luxurious.
Not exactly the red carpet people want to walk into.
Kenny Burgos is the CEO of the New York Apartment Association and advocates on behalf of landlords who own rent-stabilized apartments, like this one in Mount Eden. It's been vacant since the last tenant moved out around 2021.
And now its rent is frozen forever. So the laws in New York were already so bad. This place, which is pretty big, was being lived in by no one, and now that's definitely going to remain the case. But wait till you hear why.
Why is this apartment still vacant so many years later?
Because the law today says that when the tenant moves out, you still, of course, before law and after, you would have to upgrade and renovate this unit and bring it up to the current housing standard of 2026. The difference is now the law says we don't really care what you spend. You cannot change the rent from the previous tenants.
A 2019 change to the state's rent laws got rid of the 20% vacancy bonus, where landlords could hike rents for new tenants.
It's really a crisis.
Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal, chair of the Housing Committee, voted for that bill.
Vacancy bonus, it was an incentive for landlords to harass tenants out. Finally, we righted the scales. Landlords didn't like that, and what they said immediately after we passed it was, we're going to keep apartments off the market.
But that's reality. Reality says if your $800 apartment costs $100,000 to fix up and you can only charge $800 a month for it, you're not going to dump $100,000 into a losing investment. It's a business.
What do you say to that?
I say, what do they then say to landlords who have already gone bankrupt, who've already been in foreclosure?
Something definitely wrong here. The tug of war between landlords and tenants advocates leaves lifelong New Yorkers like Troy Williams caught in limbo.
I live in a tier 2 shelter right now, and that's why I have a voucher now, you know. And I'm really trying to, get back to where I was this time 2 years ago.
So just how many rent-stabilized apartments are sitting empty with low rents that need extensive repairs?
Question.
Well, we actually just got an answer from the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development. A survey found just under 2,500 units that have been vacant for a year or more, needing extensive repairs with rents below $1,000. Of course, these are units sitting empty when so many are desperate for an affordable place to live.
And that's just the units they know about. When this law passed back in 2019 that capped all these rents and said no more rent increases on the stabilized apartments when somebody moves out, even if you renovate, you know what landlords started doing? If they had a stabilized apartment right here, and then next to it they had a free market apartment, when both were empty, guess what they did? They combined them and made the free market apartment much larger and jacked up the rent on the whole thing. So a lot of these apartments, when this law was passed, vanished and are never coming back. But it gets even worse because all the people celebrating, they don't understand where this is going to lead them.
It's just cosplaying fairness. This isn't real fairness.
Oh.
Jan Lee, whose family has owned this Chinatown building for nearly a century, is crying foul, accusing the Rent Guidelines Board of freezing rent, despite mounds of data he says shows rising costs for landlords.
Right. They're not even hiding the bias anymore. The mayor had campaigned on a rent freeze. He appoints 75% of the board, and now he's got his hand on the scale.
Just hours before Thursday's meeting, drama unfolded when Christina Smith, a member of the board who represented landlords, resigned from her post, accusing the process of being broken and unjust.
Which it is.
But it did little to sway the result, as the Rent Guidelines Board voted 7-1 in an historic first to approve a 0% increase on both 1- and 2-year leases.
So here's the thing you got to understand. In order for this to work, you can freeze the rents, sure. But what about freezing the taxes that the landlord pays? What about freezing the landlord's insurance, which goes up every single year? What about freezing the landlord's utility costs, which in New York are some of the highest in the entire country? Remember, these landlords, they have to pay for hot water, cold water, and heat, and all that stuff's going up. Meanwhile, rents are frozen. It does not make sense to rent these apartments out anymore. It makes sense to instead keep them off the market forever because you're losing money renting them to people.
Renters say the measure was necessary as they struggle to combat inflation and cuts to social services.
What about the landlord's inflation?
So much to really affect my life in a good way.
I feel very good because in New York, that's one of the biggest problems that we have. Rent is high and we really needed it stabilized.
Mayor Mamdani, who campaigned on freezing the rent, insisted the board's decision would be fair and impartial.
Okay, well, he appointed every single person on the board, but check this out. The $800 apartment we saw, if the rent were to go up 2% instead of 0, it would have been a $16 a month increase, which means the people cheering are happy about saving $20. Like, this is not even enough money to get yourself a Big Mac meal at a McDonald's in New York City. You can't even do that. So what are people saving? There is no savings here. On a $2,000 apartment, you're saving $40 a month. Like, is that money? Yeah, it is. But that kind of money doesn't go very far in New York. Things are already so expensive, already so overpriced here. This doesn't actually help. But what it does is hurt. And maybe that's why the mayor is so excited about this.
Will ultimately hurt.
Yep. If we keep eroding one side of the equation, something's got to give, and the people in those buildings are going to suffer. So there has to be some kind of fairness and recognition of the math.
Landlords are always saying, like, it's wonderful, I know, we want to have decent rent, but at the same time, landlords like, we also have to maintain the building, and we have taxes, and we have all that stuff. So there are two sides to this story.
Absolutely.
Building's
going
to collapse.
A very valid
valid discussion that's happening in New York City, which is, can landlords absorb this rent freeze for 2 years or even longer? And there's going to have to be some compromises that are made behind the scenes on how landlords are going to maintain those costs.
Okay.
Yeah,
How do renters
compromises.
know if they live
That means firing people.
This is no longer just a city that is a playground for the rich. This is a city for the working people who make it run, and we are making it run for us.
But the rent's still too high for most people, and it's now it's frozen. It's gonna stay that way.
Struggling to figure out how we're gonna make ends meet.
Yeah.
For years, landlords have run this city, and this is like a new era of tenant power. We have a rent-free mayor. Hundreds of people came out and testified, thousands online. Like, landlords' days are over. Tenants are in power now.
Landlords' days are over.
It feels amazing.
Landlords who say they are struggling with rising costs like fuel and insurance, though, lambasting the decision.
Listen to this.
The whole process is such a farce. We're gonna have to cut back. We'll have to lay off people. We'll have to lay off some of the supers. Only choice. It's a business. People don't get it. This is a business. It's not a choice that you think this is for free.
So, rents just got frozen, so people who already have an $800 apartment can always have an $800 apartment instead of an $810 apartment next year. And what that means is the person who cleans the building just got fired. Because you know what? There's not enough money around to pay him anymore. Now the building stinks. Now it's going to start falling apart. What a disaster.
Freezing your rent. Mayor Mamdani made it a signature issue in his campaign, then followed through on his pledge to appoint half a dozen members of the 9-member board.
Buildings with rent-stabilized apartments saw their revenue
So he
increase by
appointed
more than
everyone on the
6%
board.
last year.
But while the outcome seemed like a foregone conclusion, it did not come without drama.
It was rigged.
This morning, Christina Smith, a board member appointed to represent landlords, abruptly resigned, claiming the mayor stacked the deck. The mayor, for his part, in a statement tonight, calling it a historic victory for tenants, adding, "This is the relief that working people across our city deserve."
Except for the working people who used to work on the buildings and now can't because they just lost their jobs. And look, as somebody that used to live in a rent-stabilized apartment in New York City, in the exact same neighborhood where the mayor of New York himself used to live, Astoria, Queens, I can tell you that having one of these apartments, it might sound good at first, but it's actually a trap. It totally messes up your ability to stay upwardly mobile in New York, because if you get into one of these places, my rent at the time was $1,800 a month. We got in, the increases were minimal, but when it came time for us to move into something else, all of the other rents had gone up astronomically outside of this stabilized place. So in order to jump to a bigger apartment, to an actual 2-bedroom, because our family was growing, we had to pay double the rent. We were not prepared for that. It was a massive shock. In fact, the rent was more than double. It was $4,500 a month for the 2-bedroom we found after paying $1,800 a month. So people get trapped in these things and they can't move. And now, yes, the rents are frozen on these apartments, but here's what that's going to do. That's going to mean that the people who have them have even less of a reason to move. And if people aren't moving out of the places where they live, new people who do not have an apartment yet cannot move in to New York City. And when you have zero turnover, the rent on the tiny number of apartments that still exist is just gonna go through the roof. It's gonna go higher and higher. New York City is already breaking records for how high the rents are here on these market rate apartments. And if people can't find a place to live because nobody's willing to move out and no one has the ability to be upwardly mobile, that is essentially a tax on people that live in New York City, a hidden tax. Because if you wanna leave, you're gonna have to pay double the amount of rent. People cannot afford that. When it's time to move out, or when it's time to get a bigger place, people either have to vanish or forego opportunities in life just to stay in a place that was built hundreds of years ago and is falling apart. What a nightmare. And what this basically means is the only way to stay in New York City now is to get a rent-stabilized apartment and to literally do nothing other than live there. Don't move in with other people, don't get married, don't have a family, don't have a bunch of kids, because you're not gonna be able to fit.
The Democrats have a problem on their hands now that, Obama and Mamdani, they're true leaders. Neither of them can run for president in 2018.
Well, Mamdani was here, as you know, twice. And he's a very nice guy. He's a charming guy, good-looking guy. We talk, but you can't raise taxes on people when you force them to leave your state or your city, and they're leaving and they're going to Florida. Most of them are going down to Palm Beach and Miami.
And that's the other end of this that nobody's talking about. So you've got these frozen rents. Yes, if you can get an apartment with frozen rent, You might be sitting pretty until the building you're sitting in ends up collapsing around you and you have to move out and you become homeless anyways. But the few people who end up earning enough money to move out of that apartment and pay much more for something else, if their life expands, well, they're gonna get hit extra hard by all of the new taxes that are coming, which means they're gonna have to move out, or they're gonna have to stay and pay exorbitant amounts of money to live in a city that essentially hates them and doesn't want to see people being upwardly mobile. And this is a massive problem because this frozen rent could really hurt the job market in New York City in ways that nobody's talking about either, because let's say that there are very few available apartments. Well, how do you expand your business in New York City? How does a company like JP Morgan bring in a whole bunch of people and build a new office and bring in a ton of jobs? You can't do that because there aren't places for people to live. And every single time buildings get built in New York right now, because rents are so expensive, most of the places that get built, what are they? They're one bedrooms, they're studio apartments. You might find a couple of 2 bedrooms. It was very hard for us to find the 3-bedroom apartment that we just moved out of because there are so few of these. And nobody wants to admit that what that means is if you have only studios and 1-bedroom apartments, and those are the entry-level apartments that are on the market that people can move into for $3,000-$4,000 a month, it's either that or it's a bedroom somewhere where you have a roommate. What that means is the only people that can come into New York and even get established or start doing that are people who have no other entanglements. These are going to be single people, people who most likely just graduated college, people who are starting out in the workforce potentially. That means that if you start your company in New York or you want to expand your business in New York, you can really only expand entry-level positions. It's going to be a lot harder to bring in people who have talent and are already successful because perhaps those people have more entanglements in life. Perhaps they have a bunch of kids, perhaps they have a big family, perhaps they want to have more than just a shoebox somewhere, and shoeboxes are all that's available. It's going to be hard to attract top talent. Entry-level talent, yes, but top talent, no. And that's going to mean that companies that really want to do something and really want to accomplish something and want to pay people lots of money to come here, well, they're not going to be able to do that in New York because there's going to be nowhere for those people to live. It's not like we're going to have a whole bunch of rent-stabilized apartments popping up. Now, if anything, we're going to have even fewer of them, and nobody wants to admit that what this just did was basically give 2 million people a handout at the expense of everybody else who lives in this city. How is this any different than vote buying? If you're the mayor and you tell 2 million people that they're not going to get a rent increase if they elect you, why would they vote for somebody who doesn't tell them that? The only way that somebody in the mayoral election that brought the city, Mayor Mamdani, could have won would be to out Mamdani. Mamdani wants to freeze your rent? It's already too high. If you elect me, I won't freeze it. I'll bring it down. I'll pay you to live in this city, which is the only fair way to do this because this city's been stealing from you. These landlords are stealing from you, freezing the rent. That just means they're going to keep doing it. I'm going to bring it down. Only problem is that attitude would have got somebody elected who might be even worse. This is crazy. New York's housing situation is just going to get worse after this rent freeze. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to have people that have frozen rent, and for a few years before the building they're living in collapses, they're going to say, you know what, this is great. Mayor Mamdani froze my rent, saved me all kinds of money. But then you're going to have people that don't live in a rent-stabilized apartment. These are going to be people that live in a free market apartment, and they're going to say, hey, what about us? Hey, Mr. Mayor Mamdani, what about us? We want a rent freeze too. And then the skids will be greased for the city council to introduce city-wide rent control, freezing the rent for all apartments in New York City. You see, that's what's next on the table here.
Of concern if this was just some whole cloth cut.
Abby just read the news. The guy didn't know what anybody did.
Who was cut? Who was cut? Who was cut?
Can I finish?
Tell me who was cut. Give me one position.
I don't know his list.
Just name one person or position that was cut. That's it. Before I'm supposed to panic, before I'm supposed to believe America is suddenly less safe, before we turn this into another Trump emergency, just can you give me a little information? Because if nobody can tell me what was actually cut, what the hell are we talking about? This is ridiculous. And this is for the ones who don't run reading about. That's exactly why the conversation has to be specific. If these cuts are dangerous, tell us why. Who was cut? What position? What responsibility? What capability did America lose? Because there's a difference between saying we should ask questions about this and saying everybody panic before anyone can explain what actually happened. I got a quick short setup clip here, so just watch how Abby Phillip and all the silly gooses on the panel try to set this thing up. I mean, how is this a story? Let's go.
Tonight, a major shakeup at the agency that's meant to keep America safe and help prevent another 9/11. The source tells CNN that President Trump's acting intel chief, Bill Pulte, is slashing jobs at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Now, it's not clear which positions are impacted yet, but we're told that the National Counterterrorism Center and the National Counterintelligence and Security Center are both expected to be hit hard. Now, Pulte had reportedly been eyeing large-scale cuts. Sources previously told CNN that he showed up to his new job last week and demanded a list of every employee so he could weigh whether to fire them. This is actually a pretty unbelievable story. I mean, somebody who has zilch experience in national security, in intelligence, in anything related to this field, shows up at the job on day one and just gets a list of names and then decides who should have a job protecting America and who should not? How?
And this is another point where Republicans have stood up and voiced concerns. There have been bipartisan concerns about the lack of qualification and the character or lack thereof of Bill Pulte, which is why, if you will remember, Trump for a minute there pretended he was nominating somebody else, right? Jay Clayton, and then somehow stopped that nomination and put this guy back, Pulte back, acting in because he wants this done. This is what, I think Trump sees DNI as the deep state, and then it's full of people that are working against him. And this guy's job, this guy's close to Trump. He talks to Trump. He's proximity of Trump. He's doing what Trump wants.
And even that's...
Yeah, you can see it didn't take too long to pump the brakes on this one. Not because I know the cuts are any good. I don't. Not because every Trump personnel decision is automatically brilliant. I'd never say that. But government jobs being cut is not a crisis. Me, and I assume a lot of you and conservatives have been saying for decades that Washington's bloated, inefficient, redundant, and wildly too comfortable spending other people's money. So if you tell me a federal department is cutting positions, my first instinct is, great, which ones? If you tell me they fired a central counterterrorism analyst, that's a different conversation. And if you tell me they eliminated redundant bureaucracy, as I assume they did, that's a different conversation. But CNN wants the emotional conclusion before they establish the factual premise. And they act shocked that Trump wants people around him who will execute his agenda. He ran for office, he won, he has policies he wants implemented. Remember his first term where people inside his own administration were openly bragging about slow-walking, ignoring him, or working around him altogether? Can anyone look you in the eye and pretend to be shocked that he came back wanting people who will actually do the job he asked them to do? You don't have to like that. You can criticize it, but don't act like it's some mysterious scandal that Donald Trump wants people in the government who are aligned with Donald Trump. But I digress. The real question is still the same. What specifically happened here? And Jason Rantz, who is moving up the board as far as effective conservatives on the panel. I mean, they're all great, but he's really good. Anyway, he keeps pulling the conversation back to that question. Back to it.
Well, to be a little bit of a mouthpiece for conservatives, what Anna was saying is right about some of the criticisms of Pulte. Mitch McConnell didn't want him, but it was for a specific statutory reason that you are required by law to have intelligence experience to serve as the director of national intelligence, which he does not, which is why this is a temporary role. He's acting, and technically under the Vacancy Act, he can serve in this role temporarily, but obviously a lot of Republicans are not a big fan of it. Even in his housing role, a lot of conservatives argue that he's not necessarily qualified for that either. The 50-year mortgage idea was abysmal, backfired, was not well received because, it's just like, it's a continuation of basically what FDR did. But I digress. The thing about what he's doing with slashing roles is conservatives will also say any kind of downsizing of a department that they think is somewhat useless is a good thing. Now, I know you're wondering, why am I saying useless? Well, after 9/11, DNI was created, to your point, to collect data on, foreign actors who were nefarious, but it actually added a lot of bureaucracy and it didn't streamline intelligence very well. So there's a lot of conservatives, well-intentioned, very smart, who think that DNI shouldn't exist.
The role of DNI is a coordinating role. Because the big failure of 9/11 was that all these different intelligence agencies had information about a potential attack and weren't sharing it with each other. It's 2026. There have been no similar attacks on the homeland. We have actually prevented a similar attack on the homeland.
Well, and we've prevented it recently, right? Not to the same level, and we did that despite the 40% cuts. I look at something like this and I say to myself, on the one hand, I look at this and I say, yeah, on the surface, it's concerning. But the other hand, we don't know what's actually been cut. To your point of the bureaucracy.
Concerning?
right this moment? No, it's not that concerning. Tomorrow and the next day it will. I'd like to know some of the details, though.
In 1 year, and then another.
I agree with your point.
Cuts in another year. Isn't
on
that
the bureaucracy? If we're cutting positions because they are redundancies of redundancies of redundancies, well, I am still a little bit concerned because we're in the space of intel. I'm not going to give that the exact same level of concern if this was just some whole cloth cut.
Abby just read the news. The guy didn't know what anybody did.
Who was cut? Who was cut? Who was cut?
Can I finish?
Tell me who was cut. Give me one position.
I don't know his
exactly.
list.
You don't know the list. Exactly. So I'm saying so there might be a place where we all agree.
Not letting me talk.
Because you're not saying anything.
I can't because your mouth is clapping like this, and I'm trying to get
a point that is not even up for discussion. Thank you. Let me. No, I'm not finished. Give me one more second.
Hold on.
When we find out
the problem, hold on one second.
You can ask for a list of names.
Let me let him finish, and then I promise.
When we find out the specifics, we can then look at that and say this was wrong. But I also remember not long ago, we were told all of these cuts were happening in the federal government. And we got to the point where we were told the guy who unlocks the bathroom at a park, who only has the keys to unlock the door, we're never going to be able to open the bathroom again. Like that was kind of absurd.
That is not what happened. There was a slashing of the federal government. We actually told people to stop working and then continued to pay them. So yeah, I mean, it was concerning that happened.
And then we have to
Can I say it was 100% correct that people raised concerns about it at the time because it did not make any sense. And then they tried to rehire some of those people.
Why did you say the same thing 3 times? Let me say this. He got a list. He has no experience in this area. He knows none of these people. He has no ability to know which of these people is important and which is not. And he started slashing on his first day. You trying to tell me that should inspire any confidence in us, that is about bureaucracy? He doesn't know what they were doing.
Yes, I don't think it's a mystery what this whole video is about. It all comes down to name one person or department, position, whatever that was cut, and nobody can really do it. Now, again, it doesn't prove the cuts are good. It doesn't prove the administration handled anything perfectly. And there could still legitimately be something to worry about. I just don't know. Because it does prove the panel was ahead of the fact. They had the outrage, they had the motive, they expressed how dangerous it was, they had the Trump is destroying everything frame. What they didn't have was a basic answer to the basic question, what got cut? And I think that's why Jason's pushback works here. He's not saying don't care about intelligence.